"We already sold it, Mom. Dad's farm is gone." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stared at the horizon, the same horizon my husband and I built our lives under, and felt something inside me go still. What Ethan didn't know was that I had made a promise to my husband before he died. And that promise would change everything. My name is Linda Whitfield. I've spent 68 years trying to live with grace. I was never one for grudges. But the day my son told me he'd sold the heart of our family without my knowledge, something colder than anger took root. Resolve. The news came on a humid August afternoon. I stood by the oak at the edge of Maple Ridge Farm, where Gerald and I buried our wedding rings on our 50th anniversary, a vow to keep the land in the family. 300 acres of fields and creeks, 4 generations deep. And now, apparently, gone. Ethan arrived with polished city confidence, sleeves rolled, watch flashing. His wife, Kara Whitfield, wore a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Mom," he began carefully, "we've already finalized the sale. It's done. Papers are signed," I blinked. "You sold the farm?" "Yes," Kara cut in. It was logical. The land isn't being used properly, and the offer was too good to pass up. "The land isn't being used properly," I repeated. "Your father and I worked this soil 42 years. We raised you here." "Times change," Ethan said, patience thinning. "You're not getting any younger. Managing it is too much. You'll thank us later." I looked toward the barn Gerald painted by hand, every inch a memory. "Now my son reduced it to a deal. How much?" I asked. He hesitated. $8.4 million. More money than we'd dreamed of, but roots, promises, and legacy don't appraise. "You should pack up," Kara added. "They'll break ground soon." A luxury golf resort. I turned for the house, gravel crunching like something breaking inside me. Behind the kitchen door, the tears came, quiet, searing. Beneath them was Gerald's voice, the night before he died. "Promise me, Linda. Don't let anyone take this land without a fight. I built it for you and for our family. It's yours." I wiped my face, opened his old ledger, and found an envelope in his handwriting. On the front, he'd written, "For when they betray you." This wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories coming soon. The life on Maple Ridge Farm had a rhythm as steady and comforting as the ticking of the old clock in our kitchen. Every morning, I woke to the golden light spilling over the fields, to the distant call of the roosters, and to the sweet, earthy scent of freshly turned soil. It was a simple life, quieter than most people would choose, but it was the life Gerald and I had built from nothing, and every inch of it told our story. We'd bought the land nearly 5 decades ago with nothing but a bank loan, a second-hand tractor, and a dream bigger than our means. The farmhouse had been falling apart then, cracked windows, a sagging porch, a roof that leaked every time it rained. But Gerald saw potential where others saw ruin. "One day," he'd said, wrapping an arm around me as we stared out at the acres of wild grass, "this land will feed generations." And it did. Over the years, we transformed those 300 acres into something extraordinary. Rows of corn and soybeans waved gently in the summer wind. A small orchard blossomed near the creek. We hosted harvest festivals every October, where neighbors gathered for cider and bonfires, and schoolchildren visited on field trips to learn about the land. It wasn't just a farm, it was a living memory, a legacy. Even as Gerald's health began to fail in his final years, he refused to leave Maple Ridge. "The land keeps me alive," he used to say. And I understood, because it did the same for me. Back then, I still believed our son Ethan understood too. I still thought he would honor the sweat and sacrifice that built this place. He used to run barefoot through the fields, laughing as he helped his father mend fences or harvest apples. But life in the city, and the hunger for more, had changed him in ways I didn't yet see. And so, as I stood watching the sunrise over Maple Ridge that morning, I had no idea that the ground beneath my feet was already shifting, that the storm was already on its way. It started with little things, so small, in fact, that I almost missed them. A missed phone call here, a postponed visit there. Ethan used to drive down every other weekend, bringing groceries or fixing things around the house. But after he married Kara, those visits grew less frequent. "Work's been crazy, Mom," he'd say, his voice quick and distracted. "We'll come by soon, I promise." Weeks turned into months. Soon birthdays were missed, holidays shortened. Even when they did visit, it felt more like an obligation than a joy. Kara would stay glued to her phone, barely making eye contact, while Ethan paced around the farmhouse like he couldn't wait to leave. I told myself they were just busy, building their lives, chasing dreams. But a mother knows when something deeper is wrong. I'd catch Kara glancing around the house with thinly veiled disdain, wrinkling her nose at the creaky floorboards or the worn-out curtains. Once, as we walked past the orchard, she whispered to Ethan, thinking I couldn't hear, "Imagine what this land could be worth if it were developed." It stung, but I brushed it off. After all, Maple Ridge wasn't about money. It was about memory, about family. But slowly, their words grew bolder. "You shouldn't be out here alone, Mom," Ethan would say, looking around as if the farm were a burden. "Wouldn't it be easier to move into the city? We could sell the place and buy you a nice condo, close to us." I always gave the same answer. "This is my home. I'm not leaving." He'd smile, but there was no warmth in it. Only calculation? And for the first time, I saw something in my son's eyes that chilled me. Not love, not care, but ambition. It was the first crack in a foundation I had thought unshakable. And deep down, I knew cracks like these don't stay small for long. The first time Ethan mentioned selling the farm outright, it was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The three of us were sitting on the porch, me with my cup of tea, him with his usual restless energy, and Kara scrolling through her phone. The sun was sinking low, painting the fields gold, and the cicadas hummed their familiar summer song. It should have been a peaceful moment. Instead, it became the first real blow. "Mom," Ethan began, clearing his throat the way he always did when he was about to say something I wouldn't like. "Kara and I have been talking. We think it's time you considered retiring." I set my cup down slowly. "Retiring from what, exactly?" I asked, though I already knew, "From all this," he said, gesturing at the land. "Our home, our history," with a sweep of his hand. "The farm. The maintenance. It's too much for you to handle alone," Kara chimed in without looking up from her phone. "It isn't safe out here alone, and it isn't practical to hold this much land." I stared at them, the way you look at strangers trying to speak a language you used to understand. "This farm is my life. Your father and I built it together. It's not a burden, it's my home." Ethan sighed like I was being unreasonable. "We're not saying you should give it up for nothing. The property's worth a fortune, Mom. $8.4 million, maybe more with the mineral rights. You could live comfortably, travel, enjoy life." "I am enjoying my life," I said evenly. "Right here." They exchanged a glance, one of those silent conversations married couples have, and I saw something flicker between them. Impatience, calculation, control. "I'm not selling," I said firmly. "Not now." "Not ever," the air shifted. Ethan's smile tightened. Kara's voice softened, too soft. "We'll talk about it again soon." And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I realized this wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. After that Sunday afternoon, things were never the same. The conversations about selling the farm, once rare and hypothetical, became more frequent, more pointed. Ethan and Kara visited more often, but their visits always came with an agenda. It wasn't about Sunday lunches or family time anymore. It was about convincing me to do the right thing. "Mom," Ethan said one evening over dinner, "I worry about you out here. What if something happens and no one's around?" I smiled faintly. "Doris checks in every morning, and the neighbors are close." "I'm fine," but he wasn't satisfied. "Still, if you were in a condo near us, you'd have people, community, medical care if you needed it. It wasn't just concern, it was guilt dressed as kindness." Kara played the same game, her words coated with false sweetness. "It's selfish to keep all this land when you're not even using it," she said once, while pretending to admire the orchard. Think of how many families could benefit from a new neighborhood here. I bit back my irritation. It's not selfish to keep what I've worked for. This land is my legacy. Then came the insinuations. Ethan would sigh and talk about how hard city life was, how expensive it was raising kids these days. If we had that money, Mom, we could give your grandkids the future they deserve. I knew it wasn't about the grandkids. They didn't have any yet. It was about them, about greed dressed as family duty. Each visit left me more exhausted than the last. They chipped away at my resolve like waves against a rock. But every time I heard Gerald's voice in my head, "Promise me, Linda." So I held my ground. I smiled politely, deflected their manipulations, and reminded them I wasn't ready to leave. But beneath the surface, I felt it, the change in their tone, the tightening of their smiles, the chill in their eyes. This wasn't persuasion anymore. It was pressure, and I had the uneasy feeling it was only the beginning. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I first realized Ethan and Kara were doing more than just talking about selling the farm. I had been cleaning out the old study, a room Gerald once used to keep ledgers and seed catalogs, when I came across a stack of envelopes addressed not to me, but to Ethan Whitfield. They'd been shoved into the back of a drawer I hadn't opened in months. At first, I thought they were junk mail. But when I unfolded one and saw the bold header, "Preliminary Offer, Maple Ridge Development Project," my heart dropped into my stomach. The letter was from a real estate development firm in the city. It outlined a proposed purchase agreement for approximately 300 acres of farmland in Springdale, our little town tucked inside the county that raised us, and it bore Ethan's signature, dated 3 weeks earlier. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Each one was worse than the last. Site plans, soil surveys, a proposed construction timeline. And then, the final insult, a note from Kara, emailed to the company's project manager saying, "We can get her to agree, one way or another." For a long time, I just stood there staring at the papers, the rain tapping against the windows like a cruel metronome. My mind was a swirl of confusion, hurt, and fury. Get me to agree? One way or another? They weren't just suggesting a sale anymore. They were actively negotiating it, behind my back. When they arrived for dinner that Sunday, I didn't mention what I'd found. I set the table. I served the roast chicken. I smiled through clenched teeth as Kara complimented the rustic charm of the dining room. But beneath that calm exterior, something was hardening inside me. They thought I was an old woman, too tired and too trusting to notice. They thought they could manipulate me into giving up everything Gerald and I had built. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. First, I needed to know just how deep their betrayal went. A week after discovering the development plans, the tension in our family reached a boiling point. Ethan and Kara invited me to dinner at their home, a sleek, modern townhouse that felt worlds away from the warmth of Maple Ridge. I almost didn't go, but something told me I needed to hear what they had to say. We hadn't even finished the appetizers when Ethan cleared his throat and said, "Mom, we need to talk about the farm." I set my fork down slowly. "What about it?" He exchanged a quick glance with Kara before continuing. "We've decided it's time to move forward with the sale." My stomach tightened. "We've decided. Not you've decided. Not even we'd like to talk about it." They were speaking as if my opinion didn't matter. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice calm but cold. "I told you before, I'm not selling." Kara leaned forward, her tone maddeningly patient. "Linda, this isn't about you being stubborn. It's about reality. The market's hot right now. Developers are lining up. This is the smartest move you could make." "I don't care about the market," I snapped. "This land isn't for sale." Ethan exhaled sharply, frustration bleeding through his polished demeanor. "Mom, we already listed it." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. "You what?" "We found a buyer," he continued quickly. "It's not final yet, but we're far enough along that pulling out would be complicated. And expensive." I stared at him, my hands trembling in my lap. "You had no right?" "You're not thinking clearly," he said. lowering his voice as if I were a child. Dad wouldn't want you struggling with all this. We're doing what's best for everyone. The words rang in my ears. We already listed it. They had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. And in that moment, something inside me broke. They hadn't just betrayed my trust. They had stolen my choice, and with it, the last piece of the life Gerald and I had built together. For days after that dinner, I walked through Maple Ridge like a ghost haunting her own home. Every fence post, every apple tree, every creaking floorboard reminded me of what was about to be taken from me, not by strangers, but by my own blood. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake in the middle of the night with Gerald's voice echoing in my head. "Promise me, Linda. Don't let anyone take this land from you." And yet, it felt like the fight was already lost. The next blow came quietly, almost cruelly. I went into town for groceries, and at the checkout, Mrs. Dalton, the clerk, gave me a sympathetic smile. "I hear they're building a resort where your farm is," she said casually. "Big money, they say. Golf course, spa, luxury cabins. They're calling it the Whitfield Project." I froze. The Whitfield Project. They hadn't just sold the land, they had branded it with our name. My family name, my husband's name, my legacy. The humiliation spread faster than wildfire. At church that Sunday, neighbors approached me with awkward smiles and gentle questions. "Are you excited about your retirement? Will you be moving closer to Ethan and Kara?" I couldn't answer. I just nodded and forced a smile while my insides churned. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about the erasure of everything I had ever stood for. I wasn't being consulted. I wasn't being respected. I was being handled, like a piece of property, like an old barn they were ready to tear down. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen with the lights off, staring out the window at the moonlit fields. My heart ached deeper than I'd ever known. It wasn't the sale that destroyed me. It was the realization that, in their eyes, I no longer mattered. I wasn't the matriarch of this family. I was an obstacle to be removed, and that was the moment I decided. If they were erasing me, I would write myself back into the story, on my terms. 2 nights after learning about the sale, I found myself unable to sleep. The storm inside my heart had grown too loud. I lit a small lamp and wandered into the attic, a place I hadn't visited in years. It was where Gerald used to keep his keepsakes, old journals, farm ledgers, even a cedar chest filled with letters we'd written to each other during our courtship. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe comfort, maybe guidance, maybe just a piece of him to hold on to when everything else felt like it was slipping away. That's when I saw it, a weathered metal lockbox tucked behind a stack of seed catalogs. Inside, neatly arranged, were legal documents, deeds, and notes written in Gerald's precise handwriting. At the very bottom was a sealed envelope addressed to me. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. "My Linda, if you are reading this, it means our dream, Maple Ridge, is in danger. I always feared that one day someone might try to take it from you, even our own. That is why I prepared safeguards. The land is not just ours. It belongs to the family trust I created in both our names. Without your signature, no sale can ever be finalized. Keep this letter safe, and if the day comes when you must fight for what is yours, fight with everything you have. The law and my love are on your side. Gerald." I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed, not from sadness this time, but from renewed strength. Gerald had known. He had seen the storm coming and built a wall to protect me. When the tears dried, I stared at the document spread before me. Ethan and Kara thought they had outmaneuvered me. They thought I was weak, naive, powerless, but they were about to learn that this farm was not just land. It was a promise, and I intended to keep it. The next Sunday, Ethan and Kara came to the farmhouse unannounced, a habit that had become increasingly frequent since their plans began unfolding. Kara wore her usual designer blazer and that insufferable smile that seemed permanently glued to her lips. Ethan carried a folder, probably more documents he expected me to sign without question. "Mom," he said with forced cheerfulness, "we have some updates about the sale. The buyers are ready to move forward sooner than expected. All we need now is your signature on the closing paperwork." I motioned for them to sit, though every fiber of my body burned with anger. "Before we talk about signatures," I said calmly, "I need to clear something up." Kara crossed her legs and sighed, as if she were indulging a stubborn child. "Of course, Linda. What's on your mind?" I leaned forward, resting my hands on the worn wooden table Gerald had built decades ago. "You've been telling everyone the farm is sold. You've been making plans, negotiating contracts, drawing up development blueprints." My voice hardened. "But there's one problem. You can't sell what you don't own." Ethan's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my bag and laid Gerald's letter on the table along with the trust documents. "This land was placed into a family trust 15 years ago. Without my signature and my consent, no sale can happen. Not now, not ever." Silence. The confident energy in the room evaporated like morning fog. Kara's lips parted slightly, her composure slipping. "That's impossible." The attorney said. "Then your attorney didn't do his homework," I interrupted. "Gerald and I protected Maple Ridge for precisely this reason." Ethan's jaw clenched, his voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't think I'd ever have to protect myself from my own children," I said softly. For the first time, they had nothing to say. And in that silence, I felt the balance of power shift, just slightly, but enough for me to breathe again. They had underestimated me. That would prove to be their first, and greatest, mistake. For a brief moment after that confrontation, I allowed myself to believe the worst was over, that showing them the trust documents would be enough to stop this madness. But I underestimated how far greed can drive a person, even your own child. 2 weeks later, I found out just how deep their betrayal truly ran. It started with a phone call from Mr. Collins, our family lawyer, a man who had handled the Whitfield estate for nearly 3 decades. "Linda," he said carefully, "I received some documents this morning that concerned me. Ethan and Kara are attempting to dissolve the trust." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. "Dissolve it? How?" "They're claiming you're no longer mentally competent to manage your affairs," he explained gently. "They've submitted affidavits to the probate court, statements from a doctor and 2 acquaintances claiming you're suffering from memory loss and delusional thinking." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My own son, the baby I held to my chest, the boy whose scraped knees I bandaged, was now trying to have me declared incompetent just to get his hands on the land. Mr. Collins's voice was low and cautious. "It's a serious allegation, Linda. If the judge believes them, you could lose control of your finances and property. The trust would fall under Ethan's guardianship." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time, staring out the kitchen window at the field swaying in the wind. My heart ached, from something deeper. The death of the illusion that Ethan still saw me as his mother. Later that week, I received a letter from the court, summoning me to a competency hearing. Ethan had gone through with it. He wasn't just trying to steal the land anymore. He was trying to erase me, to strip me of my voice, my autonomy, my dignity, and that was the moment I knew. This was no longer about inheritance or property. I spent the night after receiving the court summons sitting in the living room, the old farmhouse silent around me except for the ticking of the mantel clock. I felt numb, not just from shock, but from the heavy weight of betrayal that had hollowed me out. Ethan's actions weren't just cruel, they were deliberate, calculated, and ruthless. He was no longer the son who used to climb the apple trees or fall asleep in his father's lap after a day in the fields. He was a man who saw me as an obstacle standing between him and a fortune. But somewhere beneath the heartbreak, something else began to stir, a familiar strength I hadn't felt in years. It was the same fire that had carried me and Gerald through droughts and debt, the the same stubborn will that had built Maple Ridge from a patch of barren land into a thriving legacy. By dawn, the numbness was gone. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Gerald's letter spread out before me. His words seemed to leap from the page, "Fight with everything you have." I whispered them aloud like a prayer. The first thing I did was call Mr. Collins back. "I want to contest their petition," I said firmly, "and I want the best forensic accountant and estate attorney we can find." Next, I contacted Dr. Ellis, my longtime physician and a close friend, who agreed to provide a full mental and cognitive assessment, documented, notarized, and beyond dispute. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to dismantle every lie Ethan and Kara had built. Finally, I opened a dusty old notebook from the early days of the farm, a ledger Gerald had kept of every expense, every piece of land we acquired, every improvement made. It wasn't just history. It was evidence of the sweat, sacrifice, and vision that built Maple Ridge. And as I flipped through those pages, I made a silent vow. They would not win. They had underestimated me once. They would never do it again. The morning after I decided to fight back, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The fear and heartbreak were still there, yes, but they had been pushed aside by something far stronger: purpose. Ethan and Kara believed they had cornered me. They thought their lies, their signatures, their fabricated stories would bury me quietly under legal paperwork. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. My first step was to gather proof, not just of my competence, but of their deception. I started by digging through every folder, every box, every locked drawer in the house. I found financial statements from the farm stretching back decades, all meticulously recorded in Gerald's ledgers. These records showed every investment we'd made and every cent that had gone into the land, proof that Maple Ridge wasn't just property. It was a generational asset built by blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Next, I met with Dr. Ellis, who agreed to conduct a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. After a series of memory tests and neurological screenings, he looked at me over his glasses with a reassuring smile. "Linda, your mind is sharper than most people 20 years younger," he said. "I'll write the report myself. There's no way a judge will buy their story." I wasn't done. I called Mr. Collins again and asked him to start digging into Ethan and Kara's financial records, anything public he could legally access. Within days, he found something that made my blood run cold: massive debts. Ethan had taken out risky loans for a failed investment property. Kara had maxed out 3 credit lines tied to speculative real estate projects. Together, they were drowning in nearly $600,000 of debt. Suddenly, everything made sense. Their desperation, their urgency, their cruelty. They weren't just trying to steal the farm, they were trying to save themselves. And now I had their motive. Piece by piece, I was building a wall they couldn't climb. And when the time came, I would make sure every lie they told collapsed under the weight of the truth. For weeks, I'd carried my fight quietly, too embarrassed to admit that my own son had turned against me. But when the competency hearing date arrived in the mail, stamped and official, I realized I couldn't win this battle alone. The first person I turned to was Doris Miller, my oldest friend and neighbor for over 40 years. When I finally told her everything, the secret sale, the trust, the lies, she sat back in stunned silence, her hands trembling around her teacup. "Oh, Linda," she whispered. "I knew something was off. Ethan's been asking around town about zoning laws, water rights, even contractors. He's been planning this for months. Doris wasn't the only one. When word of the upcoming hearing spread, people I hadn't spoken to in years began showing up at my door. Mr. Alvarez, who leased a section of the pasture for grazing, offered to testify about how active and capable I still was in managing the farm. Pastor Coleman volunteered to speak about my leadership at the church's land co-op. Even the county's agricultural board offered written statements praising my ongoing contributions to local farming initiatives. I was overwhelmed, not just by their support, but by the realization that Maple Ridge wasn't just my legacy. It belonged to the entire community. Generations of children had come here on field trips. Local businesses relied on our produce. Our harvest festivals were the heartbeat of Springdale. Meanwhile, whispers about Ethan and Kara's schemes began circulating in town. People noticed how often they were seen meeting with developers and bankers. Sympathy shifted, not toward them, but toward me. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. What had started as a lonely battle was becoming something larger, a community stand against greed and betrayal. And I knew then that when the day came to face them in court, I wouldn't be walking in alone. Once I had allies and a growing support network behind me, it was time to go for the jugular, to prove, beyond any doubt, that Ethan and Kara had crossed far more lines than they wanted anyone to know. I wasn't just going to defend my competence. I was going to expose their corruption. With Mr. Collins's help, we began combing through every document they'd submitted to the court. The first red flag appeared almost immediately. The medical affidavit declaring me mentally unfit had been signed by a doctor I had never met, Dr. R. Keaton. Quick investigation revealed that Dr. Keaton was a distant cousin of Kara's, a dermatologist with no background in cognitive medicine. Not only that, but his statement had been written before the date of my alleged evaluation. It was fabricated. But that was just the beginning. Collins dug deeper and discovered a power of attorney document filed secretly in the county archives, one that claimed I had given Ethan authority over the farm and all associated assets. The signature was supposed to be mine, but it wasn't. I knew every loop and stroke of my handwriting, and this wasn't it. We took the document to a forensic handwriting analyst. Her report was damning. "This isn't your signature, Mrs. Whitfield," she confirmed. "It's a forgery, and a sloppy one." Every page we uncovered painted a darker picture. Falsified financial disclosures, forged bank authorizations, even an unsigned deed transfer drafted in advance of the sale. Ethan and Kara hadn't just tried to manipulate me. They had committed multiple felonies. The evidence transformed the tone of our fight. What had started as a family dispute was now a legal case, one with criminal implications. And while Ethan still believed he was playing chess, I was quietly building a checkmate. By the time the competency hearing approached, I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. Because now, for the first time, the truth wasn't just on my side, it was my weapon. The morning of the competency hearing arrived like a storm on the horizon, heavy, inevitable, and long overdue. I woke before dawn, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and stood by the kitchen window watching the mist rise over the fields. This land had seen droughts, floods, and harvests beyond measure. It had endured, and so would I. When I walked into the courthouse, I wasn't alone. Mr. Collins carried 3 heavy binders of evidence. Dr. Ellis was waiting with his cognitive report in hand. Doris, Mr. Alvarez, and Pastor Coleman sat in the gallery behind me, their presence like an unspoken wall of support. Even the county agricultural board had sent a representative to testify. Ethan and Kara arrived looking confident, almost smug. Ethan gave me a tight smile as he passed my bench, the kind of smile you give to someone you believe you've already beaten. Kara wore a tailored suit and a mask of practiced sympathy. The hearing began with Ethan's petition. Their attorney painted me as a confused, unstable widow, a woman struggling with memory issues and emotional volatility. He spoke of concerns for my safety and fears about my judgment. They presented Dr. Keaton's affidavit, the forged power of attorney, and witness statements from 2 people I had never met, both claiming I had forgotten conversations and acted erratically. Then it was my turn. Mr. Collins rose calmly. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate not only that Mrs. Whitfield is fully competent, but that the petitioners have engaged in fraud, forgery, and perjury." One by one, our evidence hit the courtroom like thunderclaps. Dr. Ellis testified to my excellent cognitive health. The handwriting analyst explained the forged signature. The real estate documents proved Ethan's financial desperation. Witnesses described my ongoing leadership on the farm. And then we presented the most devastating piece of all, the trust agreement, which legally blocked any sale without my explicit consent. By the time Collins finished, Ethan's face was pale, Kara's hands were shaking, and their attorney looked like he wanted to vanish. The courtroom went so quiet I could hear Doris breathing behind me. Paper edges rasped under the judge's fingers. He didn't look at me. He looked at the trust, like it was a witness. My palms went cold. I braced for the worst. The judge's words were measured but clear. Petition denied. Mrs. Whitfield is fully competent, and I am referring these documents to the district attorney's office for further investigation. The trap they set for me had just snapped shut on them. The aftermath of the hearing was like watching a dam burst. All the lies, manipulations, and schemes Ethan and Kara had built so carefully over months began collapsing under their own weight. And I, the woman they thought they could erase, was still standing. The judge's referral to the district attorney's office triggered an immediate investigation. Within a week, subpoenas were issued for Ethan's bank records, Kara's emails, and the development firm's correspondence. I didn't have to lift a finger. The legal system was now doing the heavy lifting for me. At first, Ethan tried to salvage the situation. He called me 3 days after the hearing, his voice soft and trembling. "Mom, can we just talk? We don't need lawyers between us. We're still family. Family." The word burned like acid. "Family doesn't forge signatures," I replied coldly. "Family doesn't try to have their mother declared incompetent." Silence stretched on the other end of the line before he sighed heavily. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We just wanted what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone," I said, my voice calm but steady, "is that you face the consequences of what you've done." Kara, on the other hand, doubled down. She released a public statement through her real estate firm, painting me as a confused elderly woman manipulated by outside influences, a thinly veiled attempt to save her reputation. But the community wasn't buying it. Too many people had seen the truth firsthand. The same neighbors who once waved politely now whispered when she walked by. Clients canceled listings. Her once bustling office grew quiet. Meanwhile, the developer who had offered millions for the land suddenly backed away, citing legal uncertainties. Without the sale, Ethan and Kara's financial problems deepened. Loan collectors began calling. Late payment notices piled up. The future they'd tried to buy by betraying me was crumbling before their eyes. And as I watched their carefully constructed empire begin to rot from the inside out, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. This was no longer about revenge. It was about justice, slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. It's one thing to fight a battle in a courtroom. It's another to fight it in the court of public opinion. And after the hearing, that second battle began whether Ethan and Kara liked it or not. The day after the judge's ruling, a headline appeared in the Springdale Herald. Local heirs accused of attempted fraud. Family trust dispute over $8.4 million farm. The article laid everything bare: the forged documents, the competency petition, the ongoing criminal investigation. They had painted me as a confused old woman. Now the town knew the truth. I was a widow defending her husband's legacy from her own children's greed. Within 48 hours, the story spread beyond Springdale. A regional TV station ran a segment titled "Farm Fight: Mother Battles Son Over Family Land." Reporters camped outside the courthouse. My phone rang off the hook with requests for interviews. I declined most of them, but I agreed to one with a local journalist named Rose Chen, whose questions were respectful and fair. The camera light clicked on. A fly tapped once against the studio window and quit. I touched the edge of Gerald's photo in my lap. "Mrs. Whitfield," she asked gently during the interview, "how does it feel knowing your own son tried to take everything from you?" I took a deep breath. "It's the deepest pain I've ever felt," I said honestly. "But this isn't just about land. It's about dignity, justice, and the promises we make to those we love. My husband trusted me to protect our legacy, and that's exactly what I'm doing." The interview went viral across social media. Strangers sent letters and emails, sharing their own stories of family betrayal. Many called me an inspiration. Others offered legal advice or donations to support the fight. The narrative had flipped. Ethan and Kara were no longer the concerned children. They were the villains in a story that now had the public firmly on my side. As for them, the fallout was brutal. Kara's real estate firm suspended her pending investigation. Ethan's name was removed from a city business council he once chaired. They were publicly disgraced, and I hadn't lifted a finger to make it happen. Justice wasn't just happening in court anymore. It was happening everywhere. When people lose power, they often become dangerous. And in the weeks following their public humiliation, Ethan and Kara grew desperate, reckless even. Their perfect image had crumbled. Their financial lifeline was slipping away, and they were now under investigation for fraud and forgery. But instead of accepting defeat, they decided to double down. It began with a knock on my door one chilly morning. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd been purchased last minute at a gas station. Kara lingered behind him, her smile brittle and sharp. "Mom," Ethan began, his tone soft, almost pleading. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "Talk about what?" "How you forged my signature or tried to have me declared incompetent." His jaw tightened. "We made mistakes, okay? But we can fix this together. We'll withdraw everything, make a public apology, and start fresh as a family." Before I could respond, Kara stepped forward. "The media attention isn't good for anyone, Linda. It's embarrassing for all of us. If you drop the criminal complaint, we can end this quietly and move on." I let out a bitter laugh. "Move on? After you tried to destroy my life?" Ethan's expression hardened, the mask slipping. "If you don't, Mom, we'll fight back. We'll claim you manipulated the trust. We'll sue for inheritance rights. And we'll drag this through the courts until neither of us has anything left." There it was, the real reason they had come. Not remorse, not reconciliation, intimidation. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Kara's perfume lingered like smoke after a match. I counted to 3, the way I did with newborn calves when they first stood. 1, 2, steady. I kept my hand on the knob. "Do what you must," I said, my voice steady. "Because I'm not fighting for money. I'm fighting for truth, and the truth doesn't scare me." I closed the door on them and stood in the quiet, my heart pounding but steady. Their threats no longer carried weight. They were the ones scrambling now, cornered and terrified, and I knew what cornered people often did next. They made mistakes. Costly, irreversible mistakes, and I was ready to use every single one of them against them. The day after Ethan and Kara's visit, I met Mr. Collins in his office downtown, a quiet, wood-paneled space filled with books, old case files, and the scent of polished leather. I had a feeling the tide was about to turn in our favor, but I didn't realize how much until he placed a thick folder on the table in front of me. "I think we have something," he said, sliding the papers toward me. "Something they can't talk their way out of." Inside were dozens of emails, internal communications between Kara, the development firm, and a private lender. We had obtained them through a subpoena issued during the fraud investigation. Most were mundane, full of legal jargon and contract negotiations. But one, dated 2 weeks before they filed the competency petition, stopped my heart. Collins didn't smile. He just turned the page and slid the printout across the desk. I recognized Kara's subject line before I read a word. Short, efficient, cruel. It was from Kara to the lead developer. "Don't worry about Linda. The paperwork will show she's not of sound mind. Ethan's already working on the affidavit. Once the petition is granted, we'll dissolve the trust and sign the sale ourselves. Closing should happen within 45 days. They hadn't just plotted to take the land. They had documented the entire scheme in writing. Another email from Ethan was even worse. "I'm confident the forged POA will hold up. Mom never pays attention to legal documents anyway." Mr. Collins's eyes met mine. "This isn't just fraud anymore. This is criminal conspiracy." I felt a strange calm wash over me. For months, I had been fighting to prove my competence, my ownership, my truth. And now, here it was. Their own words betraying their intent. There would be no more hiding behind excuses or false concern. The paper trail would bury them. We submitted the emails to the district attorney's office that afternoon. By the end of the week, Ethan and Kara received notice that additional charges, attempted theft, conspiracy, and forgery, were being added to the case. Their attorney withdrew representation 2 days later. The battle wasn't over, but the war had shifted. They were no longer predators circling their prey. They were fugitives from their own lies, and I was closing in. The moment those damning emails became part of the case file, Ethan and Kara's carefully constructed world began to implode. And this time, there was nothing they could do to stop it. Before trial, Kara took a plea. Her license remained suspended pending an ethics review, and the court assigned her community service at a housing nonprofit on the edge of town. She sent a letter through her attorney, apologies, explanations, the usual soft words. I asked Mr. Collins to acknowledge receipt and decline contact. Forgiveness is a door. It isn't a revolving one. First came the official consequences. The district attorney announced a grand jury indictment on multiple felony counts: attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and forgery. Their names, once whispered with respect in the community, were now plastered across news sites and evening broadcasts. Headlines like "Son and daughter-in-law charged in $8 million land theft scheme" circulated for days. Next came the social consequences. Friends they had entertained for years stopped returning calls. Their church quietly asked them to take a step back from community involvement. Kara's real estate license was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation, and most of her clients immediately terminated their contracts. The glossy business cards she once handed out so proudly were now worthless scraps of paper. Then, the financial consequences hit, and they hit hard. With their reputations in tatters, lenders they owed money to suddenly demanded immediate repayment. The private development firm that had promised them a multi-million-dollar payout filed a breach of contract lawsuit, claiming they had been misled about ownership rights. Their accounts were frozen pending legal proceedings, and foreclosure notices began appearing in their mailbox. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not with cruelty, but with a solemn awareness. They had wanted my land. They had wanted my legacy. But in their greed, they had gambled everything and lost. One afternoon, I drove past Kara's once busy real estate office. The windows were dark. A for lease sign hung crookedly on the door. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt free. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't haunted by anger or fear. The truth had done the work for me, and still I knew this wasn't the end. There was one final confrontation coming, one that would decide whether there was anything left to salvage between a mother and her son. And this time, I would be the one setting the terms. I wasn't expecting a knock at my door that evening. The autumn wind howled outside, scattering dried leaves across the porch, and I had just settled with a cup of tea when the rapping came. Slow, hesitant, almost childlike. When I opened the door, there he was, Ethan. But he wasn't the proud, confident man I had raised. Gone was the crisp suit and polished shoes. His clothes hung loosely on him, his hair was disheveled, and his eyes carried the weight of every terrible choice he'd made. "Mom?" His voice cracked like brittle glass. "Please, can I come in?" For a long, cold moment, I said nothing. I simply looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man who had betrayed me, but the boy I had once carried on my hip, who used to bring me dandelions from the field. That boy was buried under layers of greed and guilt, but he was still there, somewhere. I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked in slowly, as if my home were now a place he didn't deserve to be. When he sat at the kitchen table, his hands trembled. "Everything's gone," he whispered. "Kara left me. The business is finished. The house? We're losing it. I don't know where to go." I folded my hands in my lap. "You had a home here, and you burned it down." Tears welled in his eyes. I know I did. And I hate myself for it," I thought. I thought I was securing a future for us, for my family. I didn't realize I was destroying everything in the process. I stayed silent. Let the truth hang heavy between us. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally. "I don't even expect you to love me anymore." but I need you to know I'm sorry. I've never regretted anything in my life more than hurting you. It wasn't an excuse, and for the first time, it wasn't manipulation. It was raw, broken, real. I took a slow breath. Forgiveness isn't free, Ethan, I said quietly. It has conditions. And with that, the real reckoning began. The silence between us was so thick, I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall. Ethan's eyes were fixed on me, waiting, hoping for the mercy he had no right to expect. I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady but sharp as a blade. You're right, Ethan. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand. It's something you have to earn, and it comes with terms. He swallowed hard. Anything. I'll do anything. First, I began, you will cooperate fully with the investigation. No lies, no half-truths, no protecting Kara or anyone else. If you had a part in this, and you did, you'll own every bit of it. You'll confess, testify, and make restitution. He nodded slowly, shame settling over him like a heavy cloak. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I told them I want to plead guilty. I don't want to fight the charges anymore. Good, I said. Second, you will make financial amends. Every cent you took, directly or indirectly, must be repaid. I don't care how long it takes. You stole from your father's legacy, from this family. You will return what you can. His lips trembled. I have nothing left, Mom, but I'll work. I'll start over. I'll pay back every dollar. Third, I continued, my voice softening but still firm, you will get help. This obsession with money, this greed, it's poisoned you. You need to understand why you did what you did, or you'll ruin every future you have left. A tear slid down his cheek. I will, I promise. And last, I paused, my throat tightening. You will accept that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Not right away. You'll rebuild trust brick by brick. That means no showing up unannounced, no asking for favors, no pretending everything is fine. If we are ever to have a relationship again, it will be on my terms, and it will take time. Ethan buried his face in his hands, sobbing quietly. I understand, Mom, and I accept every condition. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the man he could have been, and perhaps, with time and accountability, the son I once knew might find his way back. The day of the trial arrived cloaked in a cold, gray drizzle, fitting, I thought, for the storm that had been brewing for so long. The courthouse was crowded, whispers echoing through the halls as reporters jotted notes and neighbors exchanged wide-eyed glances. It seemed everyone in town had heard about the son who tried to steal his father's legacy. I walked through the doors with my head high. For months, I had carried betrayal like an anchor on my chest. But today wasn't about sorrow. It was about truth. About a promise I'd made to Gerald the night before he died. Don't let anyone take this land without a fight. Inside, the courtroom buzzed like a hive. I caught sight of Ethan at the defense table. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. The confident boy who once believed the world would bend for him was gone. In his place sat a man hollowed out by guilt. The bailiff's voice rang. All rise. Judge Holbrook entered, stern, deliberate, the kind of man whose silence could crush pride faster than his gavel. Be seated, he said, his tone carrying the weight of consequence. The prosecutor, Mr. Lane, rose first. Your Honor, this case is not merely about property, he began, his voice clear and cutting. It is about trust. A son forged his mother's signature to sell her home. He conspired with a third party for profit. He tried to erase her name, and the legacy of a man who built that land with his bare hands. Lane's words sliced through the still air. Behind him, an assistant wheeled in a cart stacked with binders, deeds, letters, emails, financial statements. The past year of my pain, neatly alphabetized, Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Brandt, tried to sound composed. The defense maintains that there was no malicious intent, only poor judgment and misunderstanding. Lane didn't even look at him. We'll let the evidence decide that. He called the first witness, Mr. Collins, my lawyer. Calm and steady, he explained the trust Gerald had created, the clause that forbade any sale without my consent. Lane held up the forged document. And whose signature appears here? Mrs. Whitfield's, Colin said. Except it's not hers. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Lane nodded. And you can prove that? Yes. We hired a forensic handwriting analyst. The analyst took the stand next. She pointed to enlarged photos on a screen. Notice the hesitation marks here and here. This isn't natural writing, it's traced. Her voice was clinical, but each word landed like thunder. Then came the email, Kara's message projected for everyone to see. Don't worry about Linda. The paperwork will show she's not of sound mind. The jury shifted. Someone in the back muttered, My God! Ethan sat stone still, his jaw clenched. For the first time, I saw something break behind his eyes. Finally, Lane turned to me. Mrs. Whitfield, please take the stand. My heart thudded once. I stood, walked slowly to the witness chair, and placed my hand on the Bible. I swear to tell the truth. Lane's tone softened. Tell the court what Maple Ridge means to you. The oath still tingled on my tongue. I could smell polish and dust and the lemon oil they use on benches. I didn't look at Ethan. I looked at the empty space beside the witness stand and pictured Gerald standing there. I looked toward the jury, then at Ethan. My husband and I bought that farm 50 years ago. We built it from nothing. Through blizzards, through drought, through years we almost lost it. We raised our son there. Every fence post, every row of corn carries our history. When Ethan forged those papers, he wasn't just selling land. He was selling our story. Our name. The room fell silent. Lane nodded. And did you ever give your consent to sell the property? Never, I said. Not once. Did you ever grant your son power of attorney? No. Gerald and I protected against that very thing. And how did you learn of the forgery? I swallowed hard. From a neighbor, who told me they were calling it the Whitfield Project. That was how I found out my life had been sold. A hush blanketed the room. I could hear the faint hiss of rain against the windows. Ethan's lawyer rose for cross-examination, voice unsteady. Mrs. Whitfield, isn't it possible your son was trying to secure your financial future? I met his gaze. If theft is security, then perhaps. But no, sir. My son was securing his own. The gallery stirred again. Even the judge's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. After a long pause, Judge Holbrook leaned forward. Does the defense wish to continue? Mr. Brandt looked at Ethan, then shook his head. No, Your Honor. Ethan's voice broke the silence. Yes, Your Honor. I need to speak. Every head turned. Lane frowned, but the judge motioned for him to continue. Ethan stood, trembling. It's true, he said quietly. All of it. I forged the papers, I lied. I told myself I was doing it for my family, but I was only saving myself. His voice cracked. I betrayed the one person who would have forgiven me even if I hadn't asked. He turned to me, eyes shining with regret. Mom. I'm sorry. The bailiff's shoes clicked once on the tile and stopped. I watched the second hand on the courtroom clock drag a full circle. Somewhere in the hall, a phone vibrated and then died into silence. The judge let the words hang in the air before speaking. This court finds Ethan Whitfield guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. His gavel struck. You are sentenced to 5 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, full restitution and court-ordered costs, and the immediate restoration of Maple Ridge Farm to Mrs. Linda Whitfield. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the sound of quiet weeping, Ethan's, filled the room. As officers approached, he turned one last time. Thank you, he whispered. For fighting for what's right, even against me. I rose slowly. Justice isn't vengeance, Ethan, I said softly. It's the truth finally standing where it belongs. The gavel echoed again, final and absolute. Outside, the drizzle had turned to sunlight. And as I stepped into it, I realized the storm was finally over. Not because I'd won, but because the truth had, 2 days after the verdict. The town's community center buzzed with voices, flashing cameras and the faint hum of news vans parked outside. Reporters from local stations and even a few regional outlets had gathered, all waiting for the woman at the center of the most dramatic inheritance scandal our county had seen in decades. That woman was me. I hadn't planned to speak publicly. For months, my world had been private: courtrooms, lawyers, and the quiet ache. But now that the truth was out, I felt a responsibility to tell the story myself, not as a victim, but as a survivor. When I stepped onto the small stage, the chatter died instantly. I took a slow breath and began. Back then, I believed I had lost everything: my husband, my land, my dignity, and most painfully, the trust of my only son. But what I have learned since then is that loss is not the end. It's a beginning. The cameras clicked. The microphones edged closer. This farm, I continued, holding up an old black and white photo of my husband leaning on the fence we built together, was more than land. It was the story of our family. Every tree, every fence post, every crop was built with sacrifice and love. And when someone tried to steal that from me, I thought I would never recover. I paused, my eyes finding the horizon through the tall windows. But I did recover. Because truth, no matter how deeply it's buried, has a way of rising. A reporter raised a hand. "Do you plan to forgive your son?" The room held its breath. "I already have," I said quietly. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean excusing. It means freeing yourself from the weight of anger. But forgiveness does not erase consequences. Ethan must live with what he's done and earn trust back one choice at a time. A murmur of approval spread through the room. Another question followed about the future of the land, and I smiled for the first time in months. I intend to open part of the farm as a community education center, a place where young people can learn about stewardship, ethics, and the value of legacy. This land will not be a symbol of betrayal. It will be a symbol of resilience. The applause that followed was soft but genuine, and as I stepped down from the podium, I felt something shift. I was no longer the woman whose story was defined by betrayal. I was the woman who had taken that and turned it into purpose. A week after the sentencing, I was back on the farm, pruning the roses my husband had planted decades ago, when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. "Mom," a soft voice said. I turned. Ethan stood a few feet away. No suit, no bravado, just a worn jacket and nervous hands in his pockets. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," he murmured. "I wasn't sure I did," I replied. He nodded. "I started my community service yesterday. At the food bank. It's humbling." "Good," I said. Silence stretched between us until he took a breath. "Thank you for telling the truth in court. You did what a mother should do. I did what you should have done, Ethan. The right thing. I know." His voice thinned. "I lost everything. But what hurts most is losing your trust." "Trust isn't owed," I said. "It's earned. And you've only just begun." For the first time in years, the greedy, restless mask slipped. I saw the boy who used to run barefoot through these fields. "Could I stop by sometimes?" he asked. "Help out?" I weighed it, then nodded once. "Sundays, early, you'll work. No talking about the past until I say so." Tears gathered. "Thank you, Mom." "It's not forgiveness," I said. "It's a beginning." He arrived before sunrise that first Sunday, dew silvering the grass. We worked in silence. He trimmed thorny vines. I hauled branches. No excuses, no speeches, just steady labor. It meant more than any apology. "Dad loved this stretch," he said softly, glancing toward the open field. "Said the wind here felt like freedom." I remembered. Gerald had always stood there, arms spread to the breeze, dreaming. Now the place was becoming a space for Ethan's redemption. He kept coming. Some Sundays he repaired gates or painted the barn. Others he helped harvest vegetables for the food pantry. He didn't ask for forgiveness or push conversation. He just showed up. One afternoon, after mending the fence, he spoke. "I've been meeting a financial counselor. I'm paying back what I can. It isn't much yet, but I'll make it right." His eyes, once all calculation, held accountability. "I'm not doing this to impress you," he added. "I'm doing it because it's the only way I can live with myself." By sunset, my anger hadn't vanished, but it had changed shape. Less a blade, more a stone put down and left by the gate. Late autumn, he knocked on a Thursday. Sundays had become our ritual, so the surprise chilled the doorway. He held a small wooden box. "May I come in?" For a little while, we sat at the kitchen table where I'd once cried over what he'd done. He slid the box toward me. "I sold the condo," he said, "paid down debts, and I started a fund in Dad's name for young farmers." Inside lay the documents and a note. "This is how I begin to repay the man I failed and the mother I betrayed." "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because I don't want to say sorry anymore," he whispered. "I want to be sorry. With actions. I can't promise things will go back to how they were," I said. "I know. I just want a chance to build something new, even if it's fragile." For the first time in years, I took his hand. Not forgiveness yet, but the road that leads there. By spring, the farm looked different because I did. Weeds trimmed back, seedlings in neat rows, the old barn newly painted. At the center of it all, a wooden sign swung in the breeze. Whitfield Legacy Farm and Learning Center, where roots and values grow. With restitution from the case and a small county grant, grief had been turned into a blueprint. Children came each week to learn soil and stewardship. Students volunteered. Families visited for workshops. The land, almost stolen, became a living classroom. One Saturday, as kids planted sunflower seeds, Ethan stood beside me in the jacket he wore every Sunday. "You've done something incredible here," he said. I almost said. He had shown up for the unglamorous parts: fences, irrigation, compost. He never rushed healing. He never asked for credit. "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "I don't deserve to be part of it," he said. "But I want to help however you'll let me." This farm is our family's. Healing is like soil. Slow work. Keep showing up. That's how you earn your place back. His eyes filled. Not with shame this time, but gratitude. And as children's laughter rose behind us, I felt the truth settle. Legacies can be replanted. In late June, he came to the porch where Gerald and I had watched 1,000 sunsets. He set a plain envelope on the table. "This is the deed to my apartment," he said. "I sold it. I used the money to buy back the small plot next to ours, the piece we lost when Dad got sick and taxes caught up. I put it in both our names. Not to erase what I did, nothing can, but to add something good to the story." The paper rustled like a breath caught and released. It wasn't a bribe. It was a tithe. "Why?" I asked. "Because I'm not here for an inheritance," he said. "I'm here to rebuild our legacy, even if it costs me everything." I laid my hand over his. "This is a real step toward redemption. Does it mean you forgive me?" "I forgave you the day I stopped letting your choices define my happiness," I said. "But forgiveness isn't reconciliation. That's earned day by day. We watch the fields take the light. Maybe, just maybe, we could build something truer than what we'd lost." Every July, on the anniversary of my husband's passing, I held a small memorial beneath the old oak. This year, Ethan asked to speak. "Only if you mean every word," I told him. "I will," he said. The afternoon turned the fields to amber. I held a photo of Gerald, his warm eyes and easy grin as vivid as the day I fell in love. "Today," I began, "we honor a man who believed land is memory, not money. Greed tried to erase that, but truth is stronger than greed, and love is stronger than betrayal." Ethan stepped forward, hands shaking. "I stand here as the son who failed," he said. "I betrayed my father's memory and my mother's trust, but she held me to the truth. Redemption isn't a gift, it's a choice, one I make every day." We planted a sapling beside the old oak, a live vow of second chances. As my palm pressed the soil next to his, I whispered, "Your father would be proud of this." For the first time in years, I believed it. The months that followed brought something unexpected. Neighbors who had once kept their distance began returning. At first, it was pies and polite visits. Then came teachers scheduling field trips, reporters writing features, students asking to volunteer. The Whitfield name, once whispered, was being spoken with respect again, not because people forgot, but because they saw what we were building. One afternoon, during a volunteer day, Mrs. Hargrove, one of the town's oldest residents, approached me with a basket of herbs. "Linda," she said, "most people would have turned bitter, but you turned it into something meaningful." "I didn't do it alone," I replied. Her eyes moved to Ethan, working with a group of teenagers by the fence, showing them how to lay irrigation lines. He was laughing, really laughing. "He's lucky to have a mother who believes people can change," she said. Her words stayed with me. I hadn't done this for Ethan, but I had left the door open, and he had walked through it. Later, as we rested beneath the oak tree, he said quietly, "I still don't deserve how kind people are being." "Deserve isn't the point," I told him. "Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about proving you're more than your worst mistake." He nodded. "Then I'll keep proving it." In that moment, I realized the story of our family had changed. It was no longer about betrayal. It was about transformation. The following Sunday, dawn painted the sky in soft pastels. I carried wildflowers down the path to the small cemetery at the edge of the farm. Gerald's headstone waited under the oak. Gerald Whitfield, beloved husband, devoted father, keeper of the land. I knelt, brushing away leaves. "Gerald," I whispered, "the farm is alive again. Kids come to plant seeds, and your orchard's thriving. You'd be proud." The branches rustled gently above me. "And Ethan, he's trying. He's building more than fences now. He's building trust. I hated him for a long time, but I can't carry anger forever. It's too heavy." I placed the flowers at the base of the stone. "So I'm forgiving him, not for him, but for me, for us. Because peace is what I want our legacy to grow from." For the first time since his death, I felt real closure. The breeze that swept the hillside felt like Gerald's hand on my shoulder, steady, proud, at peace. A month later, the Harvest Festival returned to Maple Ridge. The air smelled of cider and roasted corn. Children ran laughing through the orchard, and sunlight caught on the red barn Gerald once built by hand. Across the courtyard, Ethan was helping kids load pumpkins into a cart. When he saw me, he smiled, not the smile of a man seeking forgiveness, but of a son simply glad to be home. As the sun lowered, I gathered everyone beneath the oak. "This land has seen hardship," I said, "but it's also seen redemption. Family isn't about perfection, it's about choosing to do better." The crowd applauded. "Ethan brought me a cup of cider. For you," he said. "We're still rebuilding," I told him, "but we're building something real." "Even if it's not like before," he said. "It's better," I said, "because this time it's built on truth." It's been 5 years since the day he told me the farm was gone. Now, as I sit on the porch watching the sun fall over golden fields, I realize we made it through. The farm thrives, not just as land, but as a living testament to resilience. The Whitfield Legacy Farm and Learning Center now welcomes students, families, and dreamers. What was nearly stolen has become a sanctuary for growth and second chances. Ethan runs the Learning Center now. He teaches young farmers about integrity and stewardship. He still shows up early, still works hard, and every evening I walk the orchard Gerald planted and whisper, "We did it." Before going in, I pause by the small memorial under the oak. Gerald Whitfield, his roots endure. They do. In the soil, in the family we rebuilt, and in the man our son has fought to become. This is our legacy now. Not betrayal, not bitterness, but rebirth. Because love, tested, scarred, and hard-earned, grows deeper with every season. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it. If you have a unique story of your own, share it in the comments below. Thank you for listening.